Good evening, everyone. My name is Brad Jackson. I am the new Superintendent Director at the Shawsheen, and I want to thank you all for joining us today for this important part of our hiring process for the new Director of Support Services at Shawsheen. This is a new process to many, and one that I've had a lot of success with, where we utilized the screening, or I utilized the screening committee to review all of the applicants and to interview a set of semi-finalists that they selected. And then with the only requirement that they pass along to me 3 to 5 finalists. They chose to bring forward 3 finalists to me, and tonight, over the next 2 hours and 15 minutes, we're going to spend some 45 minutes with each of them. And give anyone in our community, parent, school committee member, staff member, an opportunity to ask, kick the tires, so to speak, and ask any questions of our candidates. Tonight, I'm seeing we have about 22 participants at this point in time, so I'm going to try to keep this somewhat informal and allow people to either ask questions by unmuting yourself and asking a question, or if you would prefer, and when you do ask a question, I would ask that you turn your video on. Other than that, you do not have to have your video on, and if you would like to have a question asked and would like to not utilize your video or audio, you could put it in the chat box. If you look down at the bottom of your screen, you'll see kind of a word bubble that says the word chat on there that will give you the opportunity to either send a message to either the entire group, or you can send under the to message, you could send it just to ST Video Conference, which, as you can see on my screen, is the name that's on the bottom of the screen, and that will just come to me and no one else will see it. So with that, with those rules and plan in mind, I wanted to first introduce our first candidate, who's Jeff Albert. Jeff is joining us tonight and will be with us for the next 45 minutes. Jeff, I'd welcome to our virtual meet and greet at Shawsheen, and I'd like to, first of all, give you the floor and ask you for a few moments to review your background with the group so that they have a good sense of where you come from, and then we'll begin the conversation. So Jeff, welcome, and thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Brad, so much for having me tonight, and thank you to everyone who's joined this conversation. I really wish that I could have met you all in person and we could have done this in a real format to meet one another and to greet one another. But as you know, these are some very interesting times we're living in, and we're all sort of adjusting and rolling with things as we go. So a little bit about me. You know, I am the father of 2 and the husband of 1, and I born and raised in the Merrimack Valley, grew up in the Dracut area, went through the Dracut Public Schools, and ended up starting my career in the Merrimack Valley in my hometown. So I've spent about half of my career in comprehensive K-12 education. I've got about 27 years under my belt at this point, all of it in special education. And I'm honestly able to say blessed at this stage to say that it's been in special education. From about the middle of my career, I transitioned from comprehensive K-12 to vocational education, vocational technical education, and I've been in many capacities in all of the positions I've been in. So I started as a teacher, worked my way sort of through to being a team chairperson for special education. From there, transitioned to be a supervisor of special education, and then ultimately landed to be the director of special education at Greater Lowell Voc Tech in my most recent position. And I've got about a 1-year experience at a special education collaborative. So I've had the luxury and blessing to see the many faces and worlds of special ed, and have dealt with all different types of students and needs and programming at this stage. I've done a little bit of everything. I've done programming for kids. I've set up curriculum and individualized instruction. I've chaired coordinated program reviews, set up budgets for special education, done some program expansion on the vocational technical side of things, which has been super exciting. I'm also very happy to say that I've got a nice network of professionals that I can lean back on now due to my past experiences. And I just feel that at this stage of my career, my heart and soul really is in vocational technical education. And I truly love it, and I'm passionate about it, and passionate about the students in it as well. So it was just a natural decision for me. Currently as the Assistant Executive Director of Case Collaborative, working with some very, very impacted students and families. I saw this opportunity when I really wasn't looking for it. And I saw, I felt that flutter. Wow, I have a chance to maybe go back to vocational technical education and work with a dynamic team. So here I am today, and I'm glad to answer any questions that anyone may have for me.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Jeff, and welcome to Shawsheen. While people formulate their thoughts and either put something in the chat box or basically turn their video on and physically raise their hand, why don't you share with us why and you mentioned it a little bit, but I'd like you to expand on it. Why Shawsheen? What is it about Shawsheen and this particular opportunity that you find interesting?
So being in the world of vocational technical education, it seems like it is a big world in many ways, but when you're in it, it starts to feel small because of the amount of networking that we're able to do in our field, and the ability for us to lean on each other and explore ideas and approaches. And I've always known Shawsheen Tech to be the envy of many, many other vocational technical schools. And I remember many times, when the MCAS scores would come in, or we would be reading the Lowell Sun, or we would at Greater Lowell, we would sit back and be like, wow, Shawsheen's they're just always on the front lines. They're always innovating, and they're always really stepping up to the plate to meet the needs of their students. And quite honestly, that is a draw, because you get the sense from years and years of reading and seeing the results that Shawsheen Tech has achieved, that there's a lot of magic going on there. And there's a lot of solid, established, good teaching principles in place. There's a long-standing staff who stays and is committed to kids, and those types of things shine through when you're exploring. So when I saw the opportunity, I thought, wouldn't it be great to join a team like that and continue the mission, and focus on continuing what's going well for Shawsheen and what Shawsheen's good at, and then collaboratively looking at what does Shawsheen need to be better at, and then working on those things together as a team.
Thank you very much. Ms. Gillis, you had a question you wanted to ask.
Yes, I did. Nice to meet you, Mr. Albert.
Nice to meet you.
I was wondering, what is your specific philosophy regarding the unique role of special education at a vocational technical high school?
So in a greater sense, I know that, from a state standpoint, and, we have to identify these students as students with special, needs, IEPs, and disabilities. But, along my path, I've come to really believe that students with IEPs are students of different abilities. So I think that the kids that come to Voc Tech schools who are under the IEP are just kids with different abilities in many ways. And that I think that if you take that mantra and you infuse that into the culture of your school and look at kids that way, confidence grows, barriers come down, and I think that those kids in particular feel a greater sense of belonging. I can't tell you how many times I've brought kids in because at my previous 2 positions, I was the intake person at Monty Tech and at Minuteman for all of the special ed kids for the incoming freshmen. And, to be able to get them excited and break down some fears that they have and show them that they too can access the skills and the opportunities that only vocational technical education can offer them. And these kids are looking, they're thirsty and they're looking for something different. There's a reason why they apply to Voc Tech education. And it's because, they know they learn a little differently. And they know that, many of them have talents that aren't tapped into. So my philosophy is that they're kids, just like kids who aren't identified, who happen to have some weak areas that we need to help them strengthen, but we also have to celebrate all their strengths and successes as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Any questions from the group of folks that we have assembled here tonight? We have 32 participants, including myself and Jeff. Linda, are you raising your hand, or are you just Linda's iPad Pro? You are muted. If you have a question you'd like to ask, you should unmute yourself before you ask it. If not, anyone has a question, I certainly can ask questions if people would prefer, but this is an opportunity for you to ask the questions that you think are important for this process. Gracie Dipolito has raised her hand. We have a Zoomer here. Gracie. Oh, you are muted, however. Let's see if I can I think I just unmuted you. There you go.
I got it. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
I'm not a fan of Zoom, but I do have other programs that I use. So I was trying to log into the computer, the laptop, but I'm on my phone and I don't like it. So I have a question for you. So given the fact that we're still under that pandemic time, how would you be able to move forward and challenge the students, the IEP 504s, even regular education students, but we're talking about IEP 504 students? How would you be able to challenge them during either whether they're in remote learning or presently full-time? How would you be able to make a plan for them, especially with remote learning, if we were to go all remote learning or hybrid?
Right. It's nice to meet you, Gracie.
Nice to meet you.
That's a very good question, and it's also a very difficult question. I can speak because I've spent my last year at a collaborative. I can tell you that meeting the needs of kids impacted to the level where they attend a collaborative educational experience, remote learning is very, very challenging and difficult, and a real hard and heavy burden on these families. And it's been, in many ways, it's been heartbreaking to see, but in many ways it's been inspiring too, to see how teachers step up to support kids and families. And I think the first thing that, of course, challenging our students is very important, But I think the first thing that needs to be established is that the students and the families absolutely know that you are there, that you are there to support them and cheer them on. And you're there to support and answer any questions or wipe any tears, virtually wipe any tears that they have, because it's very difficult. And I couldn't help but think, being at a collaborative, and having so much experience in voc tech education, what an enormous challenge this must have been for vocational technical schools to even try to replicate the shop side, the vocational side of what these students need to learn to attain the competencies in their shop area. And you really can't replicate those experiences to the full level in a virtual way. It's just not possible. So it really relies on the team, and to take a we mentality, academic, vocational, and really either work together to see how you can integrate some activities for students who are really struggling, and really pick out, I guess, projects on the vocational side of things that you feel kids can access. And then there's a whole other layer of problems that come along with that. One kid could have full access to technology, resources, parent support, and then the next kid might not have internet access and might not have the same family support as another student. So we really need to know our kids. We really need to know our students and have relationships with them. So this opening coming up is even more challenging, because you have a class of incoming freshmen now who don't know Shawsheen, who don't know their teachers, who would already be anxious had they been coming in under normal circumstances. So it's really going to take a village of Shawsheen to outreach to these families and give them that confidence that we would be there for them. And I think once that's established, the challenge and the rigor can be handled by these kids and families a little bit easier. And I think that on the flip side of that, you have to be careful not to overwhelm families as well, because I've had the flip side happen where we're inundating families with Zoom meetings and projects and activities, synchronous and asynchronous. And some parents are calling me, just throwing their hands up saying, "Can you slow down? I just can't handle this. I'm just trying to keep food on my table and keep my kids happy." So there's a real gamut that's played there. And I think we as school administrators and school leaders need to always, try to put ourselves in the shoes of our kids, our families, and our educators that are trying to meet the needs. It's very difficult.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Our next question comes from the chat box. What can be done to accommodate students with sensory issues with regard to the need to wear masks in school? Are you able to work with staff to find alternatives, for example, face shields or something else for these children?
Yes, great question. I think that is something that each organization needs to work together to determine. I think that absolutely alternatives should be explored for kids with sensory issues or whatever other health issues that they might have that would prevent them from wearing a mask in a typical way. And I think that face shields is another option, and I think of, not only kids with sensory issues, but you have to also think of kids' learning style. Some kids are visual, and they're looking at your face and your body language, and they're looking at your lips moving, and they're increasing their ability to communicate because they have that input. So when a teacher puts a mask on and a kid learns by seeing the person's body language and face, it can create some confusion and difficulty for kids. So, those things also need to be looked at very, very carefully to make sure that, we're not creating a communication barrier. And if we are, what are we going to do to mitigate it? Would it be that we would have masks that have, some masks that have a clear window on it so you can still see the lips move? I know that's really being explored with some speech language pathologists right now in order to, it's very hard to provide therapy with a mask. So the other thing is, can you do some social distancing to a degree that, people are safe and you can still go on with teaching whatever you need to accomplish, with proper social distancing in place. So I think all those factors need to be looked at. And I think right now the state and districts are scrambling to really try to hone in on how they're going to solve these problems. But I do think flexibility of mind, being open-minded, entertaining any and all ideas, all voices being heard who come and want to contribute to solving that problem will be important.
Thank you. Jeff, what is your experience with working with a technical school in terms of formulating an IEP to be incorporated into the vocational shops to support teachers and the shop teachers and both the shop teachers and the student?
Yeah, so like I've said, I've got quite a bit of experience working in technical education, all of it in special education. And, I've had the luxury to really be able to build some great relationships with shop teachers. And, it's impressive, really, when you really look at what these shop teachers do for kids. Like I was saying to you, Brad, in our face-to-face interview, that, there's a lot to be learned from shop teachers and how they maneuver and build relationships with kids, because these kids come into technical education and once they pick their shop, they're basically spending 30 plus hours in that shop with those teachers. And those teachers are creating relationships with them that a teacher on the academic side just doesn't have the luxury of time. I'm sure if they did, they could do it to the same level, but because the shop teacher has so much time with those kids, they're really able to know them and almost anticipate the struggle and be proactive in many ways. I've seen so many phenomenal shop teachers work magic with kids of all levels and abilities. And I've also heard many times, that the relationship is really what helps the kid progress to a greater degree than knowing every in and out of the IEP. So I think the special educator's role in terms of the shop teachers is to really, at least the last 2-3 places I've been, help them be familiar and understand, what their role is in the IEP. Don't just assume that they know their role. Sometimes spending some time with them, visiting their shops, talking to them, having a relationship with them will enhance their ability to meet the needs of the kids. I think that from an executive functioning standpoint, from a social emotional standpoint, and to some degrees, even from an academic standpoint, the shop teachers can play a tremendous role in the growth and progress of IEP goals. Because when a student is in a shop increasing their soft skills, their employability skills by whatever measures are set up, being in class on time, having the proper attire, having the proper safety equipment, all of those planning and organizational activities are executive functioning. So I think that what I typically see happen is I'll go into a shop and the shop teacher will say, I don't know if I'm meeting this IEP. I just know that Johnny needs A, B, and C, and I'm doing the best I can. And then sometimes what I'll do is I'll peel that IEP back and I'll say, look, this is how you're addressing this goal, and this is how you're addressing this goal. And sometimes it's just creating a common language that helps shop teachers implement the IEP, even at times when they feel like they're not doing it.
Thank you. Let me just ask another question. And it took the question I was going to read right out of my screen. Jeff, what kind of experience do you have with family engagement? How do you envision engaging students and families in the process of getting the buy-in from all parties?
So I think the family engagement is essential to building a positive school culture, because at least my philosophy is that everything, all of the success that schools get to experience really come from having a relationship with the community, relationship with families, relationships with kids, and relationships with each other. So family engagement, I think that it starts off in a very personal way. I think that, you know, each individual teacher that has students on their roster, there's a threaded effort to know their students, have reached out to those families, have established a means of contact, is timely in communicating, not you know, sort of having an email sit for days and days and days, or a phone call, and, you know, trying to be reasonably responsive to our families. And, you know, other more formal ways to increase parent engagement is to really, you know, try to find out what are parents looking for, what are parents desiring, whether it be you know, especially in the world of special education. Is there a particular area that, you know, we keep getting questioned about, whether it be, you know, the autism spectrum, or it be executive functioning, or you know, ADHD, or specific learning disabilities, and use your resources to create a series of professional development for parents, so they can come in at a PAC meeting, and instead of sitting through something that may not be productive for them, sit through, you know, a dynamic speaker who may have an angle or have experience working with families of a particular disability area. You know, inform families about, you know, what is transition and what does it mean? You know, inform families about, you know, what is, you know, my students in high school, what are the next steps? What's coming? Always thinking about helping to prepare families for what's coming in their child's future. So the other thing is to be approachable and to be visible. I think that, you know, parents, at least my experience and philosophy in having an open door policy, always having an open door policy, and really, you know, exuding a warm and welcoming stance with families, you get increased engagement. They want to communicate with you. They want to talk with you. And I think that, you know, by the time they get to high school, a lot of parents out there feel pretty burnt by the system. And for whatever reason, you know, their kids get to high school, especially students on IEPs, and parents feel they've had to fight tooth and nail for every single thing that they've achieved on that IEP. So they're holding on tight, and they're not trusting. So you have to gain their trust, and you have to show them through your actions why you can be trusted. That, you know, Shawsheen Tech is here to meet the needs of their child. Shawsheen Tech is going to be innovative and think outside the box when it needs to. and Shawsheen Tech is always going to make you feel part of the team.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Jenna's question, then I'm going to call on Mr. Siddell, who's raised his hand. So the next question is, have you ever been in a situation where you found that vocational education was not a right fit for a student? And if so, how did you handle that?
Yes, I've had in all 3 Voc Tech schools that I've worked in, I have had situations where students, for whatever reason, could not access vocational technical education, and it's a tough process. For some, in some cases, it's a heartbreaking process, and I think that you have to really be empathetic and careful in how you handle those cases. And I think that you have to be honest, always be honest, and you have to really have data that you've collected over time to really show the team and the family, what the student needs. And sometimes it is true. Sometimes the student, through a process of data collection, the team lands in a place where the student really can't access vocational education, and they might need something more therapeutically based, or they might need something more life skills based. I've seen many different scenarios where that's happened. I think Voc Tech districts need to be careful, and it's almost like that situation needs to really be a rare situation, because you don't want to be in a situation where you're sitting at a team meeting and you haven't gathered the data, you haven't done the homework, you haven't worked with the team, and you're basically saying that it's not a good fit because we don't have those services, or we can't provide that. That's not how to go about this, because it's really, at the end of the day, it's all about what that particular student needs, and then either creating that within the setting that the student's in, or knowing that that's the setting isn't appropriate, but another setting would be, and having that conversation.
Thank you. Mr. Siddell.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Albert. Thank you for here. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. So if this question was asked, I apologize. I got on late, so please tell me if you answered this. But if you think of your own professional development over the last few years, could you name something that perhaps a few years ago you would have considered a weakness? And what did you do over the last few years to now make that a strength? And what would be next for you? Where would you like to focus your professional development over the next few years?
That's a really good question. Thanks for asking that. So the answer is yes. A few years ago, I had the awesome opportunity with the superintendent at Greater Lowell Voc Tech. He had come in at the same time that I did, and the staff was really a hurting staff. They had been through a lot in terms of contract negotiation and admin versus teachers, and just sort of a culture of animosity. And what ended up happening is that we noticed that many people, I think not intentionally, developed a fixed mindset. So I started to get very curious about positive psychology and the philosophy of a growth mindset. So the superintendent and I, at that time, were able to secure funding for a huge team of people to go out and go to this amazing PLC conference and really sit in on a wide variety of breakout series, on poverty, on executive functioning, all kinds of topics. But what kept nagging at me was this idea of the importance of a growth mindset. And as I started to dig into it, my own mind opened up, and I said, wouldn't you know it? In many aspects of my thinking, I had a fixed mindset. I put limits on kids. I put limits on teachers. And I think that it was a huge epiphany for me in terms of opening my mind and really, you know, whether consciously or unconsciously, you know, if that was the message that I had been emitting in any way, you know, I wanted to fix that. So I got deep into the research and got really excited about it. And for the opening of our school year, a few years back, you know, the superintendent sort of cut the reins loose and let me develop a whole welcome back to school. And in an effort to unify the staff, you know, we chose to use the tenets of growth mindset. So I did like a 2-day presentation on, you know, what is growth mindset, with some activities and examples. And we started the year off as that is our unified thought. And you know, it was so positive and received so well that it stuck as a theme. You know, it didn't like dwindle out. You know, sometimes you go to a PD and you're excited and you bring it back to your building, and you know, 2 weeks go by and no one's really talking about that anymore. This particular experience lasted the entire school year and developed into all kinds of departmental mini breakout professional developments. So I would say that was a great eye opener, and I know I still carry all that with me today. What do I see for myself going forward in terms of professional development? I would say I'd like to continue to really stay in the lane of positive psychology and a growth mindset, and that belief that all means all, and you know, all students can learn at high levels. And I know that you know, that sounds like a loaded statement, but when you look at each kid as an individual, you know, it is true. All students can learn at high levels. So
Thank you so much.
That's that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. So we have about 7 minutes left in this session. So I may not be able to get to all the questions in the chat. So I'm going to try to go through them in the order in which they arrived, and then we will, but I do want to stick to the 45 minutes so that each of the candidates has an equal opportunity. So let me see, I lost my place here. I'm finding it. How often have you involved the BSEA mediation process when a parent or guardian rejects or partially rejects an IEP and asks to meet with the team to discuss why they are rejecting?
Great question. So yes, I have been involved in BSEA mediations and hearings. Personally, for me, it's always a goal to resolve conflict, you know, at the level that I receive it. So my approach is really to work collaboratively with the players on the team, with the district, and with the family. And I think that many times when I've either gone to mediation or gone to a hearing, you know, what ends up happening, the realization is that the parents just felt unheard. The parents just needed to feel validated, and to know that we understood their angle. So I think there's a huge level, you know, empathy is a huge important factor, because you have to, I think, if you're going to be an effective leader, you have to put yourself in the shoes of the person who's having the pain, who's having the struggle, to try to see the issue from their angle. And I think when you do that, it opens your eyes a little bit. You know, I know there are some special ed administrators, you know, that will just say, well, let's just follow the process. Go ahead and reject it. You know, we'll take it to the next level. And I think that, not that it's the easy way out, because sometimes that is the only way to resolve a conflict, but in my experience, I'm happy to say that I've only had to go to mediation, I think, 2 times. And it was because I inherited a situation. It really wasn't caused by an action or a disapproval of anything that I had done, but it was a set of circumstances. But in the hundreds of conflicts that I've had, for the 99% of them, I resolve them in my office, you know, with my team and with the families. And it's really by using a we approach. You know, it's not an us against you. It's a, you know, we hear you, and we have this problem, and try to offer some solutions or some middle ground that lands the team in a place or in a situation with an outcome that says, you know what, we can all kind of live with this. Parents don't love it, district doesn't love it, but when you boil it all down, it's something we can all live with and go forward with. So I've had very good success with conflict.
Thank you. I'm going to just take one more question out of the chat box and then give you an opportunity, Jeff, at the end to maybe wrap up for 1 minute if you'd like to do that as well. But we'd like to, one of the questions is about establishing or reinvigorating or reconnecting with a CPAC. How would you, what's your experience with working with a CPAC, and how would you, as you enter Shawsheen, assess where our CPAC is and what it needs from you?
Right. I've had experience with many different types of CPACs. So I've had some CPACs that were really a group of people that wanted to point fingers and find fault and almost create conflict. So I've had to manage, you know, try to shift the thinking in a CPAC like that. And I've had other CPACs that have just been fantastic, where we're offering PD and we're having speakers come in, and, you know, we're talking about the successes of kids, and, you know, and you know, what's next? What can we do more? You know, what can we get better at? So I don't know the condition of Shawsheen's CPAC, but I think that, you know, I'm experienced in coming in, and whatever it is, either keeping a good thing going great, or you know, if I have to scratch it and start from square one with surveying parents, making some calls, building relationships, and building it from the ground up, I've done that as well. So I'm very comfortable with either scenario, and I think it could be a very valuable and resourceful tool for a district. I know that at Greater Lowell, we got to the point where we were able to have, you know, our parent organization and our CPAC in many ways collaborating and working together, which was really positive. So, you know, I'm hopeful that I would be able to do some pretty cool things with that.
Great. So Jeff, your time with us is coming to an end. It is 6:44, and I do want to be fair to all of our candidates. So I'd like to offer the last word to you. Do you have any final thoughts or messages for our parent and staff communities that you have this opportunity for this meet and greet today?
Sure, I won't take much more time. I want to thank everybody for the questions and the opportunity to meet all of you. I think that every organization picks the leader that they need. And, you know, I hope after hearing, you know, sort of my philosophy and how I approach things, that, you know, that I would be I would be the type of leader that Shawsheen would need. I'm certainly excited about the opportunity. I would love to join the team at Shawsheen and continue the awesome work that's happening there, and also roll up my sleeves and work together on what do we need to get better at. Just know that I have a we versus an I mentality. I have an open door policy. I tend to be an optimist to the aggravation of some, but I am an eternal optimist in many ways, and I approach my work and my life that way. So I love working with kids, and I've had a great run. I'll leave with this. I've gotten to the point in my career where I'm blessed to be able to say that, I don't wake up and say, oh, I have to go to work today. Oh, I got to get in the car and do this. I've actually, I'm in a place where I can say confidently, I get to do this. I look in the mirror and say, I get to do this today. I get to go help kids. I get to go work with some amazing educators. So that's the sort of approach I take. So thank you, everybody, for the time. I wish you all the best in your decision-making process around this. I know it's a big decision, and hopefully I'll be able to work with you all.
Jeff, thank you very much for coming and joining us tonight. I too am sorry that we couldn't meet face to face. I'm very pleased to say we have almost 40 participants tonight. So obviously this is a very important pick, and we have a lot of community involvement. I'd ask you, Jeff, if you would leave the meeting now, and so that we can invite the next candidate in. But thank you, Jeff, and you and I will be talking in the next day or so.
Thank you all. Take care.
So everybody else, if you'll just stand by, I just texted our second candidate and asked her to enter, and she is just coming on board now. Wow, you would think we had rehearsed this. Mary Jane, welcome. For all of those who thought they might be time for a bathroom break between candidates, surprise, there isn't. Mary, I'd like to, we're going to move right to our second candidate, Mary Jane Rickson, who joins us tonight. Welcome to Shawsheen and our meet and greet. Mary Jane, we have about 45 minutes and we have about 30, at this point in time, 40 participants in our Zoom session. I will, as it's kind of evolved, I'm somewhat moderating this whole thing, and we do have some questions in our group chat that I'll be probably asking, and people can also ask more. So to start things off, Mary Jane, if you could introduce yourself and provide the group with a little bit of background about where you come from and your work history.
Sure. My name is Mary Jane, and this is my 30th year in education. Of those 30 years, 25 of them have been in CT education. So I'm very excited to get back into CT education. I started my career in an inner city in Springfield at a vocational school as a history teacher, and proud to say that one of the very first things that we brought into Putnam when I was there was inclusion. So I was one of the very first teachers to use inclusion in the classroom way back when, so that was exciting. And then I moved on to administration and in Putnam, and then I moved on to Bay Path to become a dean of students, which was a 10-month position because my children were a little younger back then, and I wasn't interested in working year-round when they were older. And then I was fortunate enough to obtain an assistant superintendent position at Pathfinder, which I really, really loved. But unfortunately, I was looking for to move on to a bigger district, so I was able to talk to my superintendent, and we found me a position and as a director of curriculum. And one of the things that I really liked about that is I was able to really understand that special ed and equity and access for all students has always been my top priority, and has been something that I've been fighting for my whole life. And I think as an administrator, being the director of curriculum really allows you that opportunity to make sure that those modifications, accommodations, and student needs are being met through the curriculum and working with the teachers. And then last year I did an interim in Maynard, and I really enjoyed that very much, but I'm very interested in returning back to CT education and really focusing on students' needs. The last year was very trying. As much as I enjoyed being the superintendent, I do not envy being that next year. So God bless you, Brad. I think it's going to be a very interesting year next year. So I thought that I really like to get back to my roots in special ed, and really, especially now what's happening in the future, in the next few months, and talking about what school's going to look like. I'm very interested in becoming part of helping students and teachers really transition back, really addressing their social emotional needs, and seeing what I can do to become part of the solution. I think a lot of people are really trying to churn their wheels on what's going to happen, but I think we need to take some action, and I would really like to participate in part of a process to do that. So that's what's brought me to Shawsheen.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary Jane. I think you called me crazy somewhere in there for being a superintendent, and I think you're right. You're right on. So they or glutton for punishment. I'm not sure what it is, but there's certainly some of that there. So the first one I wanted to start out with, Mary Jane, was so why Shawsheen? I understand you're interested in CTE education, but why specifically does Shawsheen interest you?
Shawsheen has been an excellent reputation. I have been, as I said, part of a cohort of administrators for the last 15 years, and Shawsheen has always stood out to be the most cutting edge. They have they're very strong advocates of vocational education, and your past superintendent, two superintendents ago, was really the top advocate for CT education in the state. He went to Washington, in the United States, to be honest with you. So Shawsheen has really taken the bull by the horns and shouted to the rooftops and lobbied for what it looks like to be a great institution. They've worked with trying to create the educational formula. I just want to be part of the process, and I know that Shawsheen has always been involved. I like to take action and be part of the solution, as I said before. And I think Shawsheen has always been on the forefront to do that. It has great reputation for the 21 vocational programs it has. The special ed populations have been very, very well received over the last few years. I know there's been some difficulties in the past, but prior to that, they've been an excellent advocate for the students. So I really want to be part of a district that really is one of the top tech schools in the state, to be honest with you. It is one of the top in the state.
Thank you. And we won't be done until we make it the top tech school in the state. So Ms. Gillis, did you want to ask the first question from the group?
Sure. Hello, nice to meet you. I apologize for my dog barking in the background.
Sure.
What is your specific philosophy regarding the unique role of special education in a vocational technical high school?
I think it's important that all students are treated fairly. Now, we have to keep that in mind. Fairly is not always equal. So we need to make sure that our students are being treated and brought into the career technical areas without question. If a student wants to take a specific shop, we really need to take the time to see what we can do to make changes and modify and really find out what makes that child tick and how we can get them to become part of the area they're interested in. I think all too often, a lot of times, tech students don't get everything they want in special ed students because the districts have a hard time trying to accommodate. But as I talked to Mr. Jackson earlier, one of the things I will be doing is advocating to really push. If a student wants a specific area, then we need to make sure that student is available. It is not 52 anymore. All students can be successful in no matter what they do. We have students who have cognitive disabilities who are being successful in life. We have students with developmental disabilities, students with, autism on the spectrum, and behavioral issues, and they're all being successful in life. So I think that starts with making sure that they have the skills and the knowledge and the accommodations to help us get them there. So my thing is really to make sure that everybody receives an equal and equitable education. So what equitable means for one person, it doesn't mean it's equitable for somebody else. So I'm all about equity, access, and really it's important that they have access to what they need. Students have to really be part of the conversation. What do they want to do? How can we help them get there? And I think keeping the lines of communication is important. So really communicating their needs back and forth, and having honest conversations with the tech education instructors, and how can we accommodate them. It may be as much as, what can we do to accommodate the shop safety issues. And I think a lot of that has been some of the things people worried about in the past, but these people can go on to be successful. I'm going to say something that's might be a little silly, but I watched a movie last night with my family, and Nothing is Impossible. It was about a family of wrestlers, and this wrestler at the end was blind, and he became a blind wrestler. So there's no reason that students cannot be successful. So I think, I'm using that as some of the inspiration I have. So I really think that making sure that everybody has the ability to do what they want, and there's no limits to anybody's abilities.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, Mary Jane, talk a little bit more about your experience about working with vocational teachers to both formulate and implement an IEP to both support the student and to support the shop teacher themselves.
Sure, I think that's important. One of the things you have to do is really have conversations early on, especially during the transition. So it's important that we really take the time to really look at the 8th graders' IEP. Let's sit down, we talk to the 8th grade team, we talk to the students, we talk to the parents, we take a look at their IEP, and we make the comparable accommodations for grade 9 through exploratory. And as we continue to assess the student through our own means, through data, through discussion, through progress monitoring and such, in January we would get back together. By that time the student actually picks the shop that they're interested in, or the career technical education, the area they're interested in. And then we sit down and we work on the IEP and how to do that. One of the things you certainly have to do is make sure that you have the teachers who have professional development in that area. So you'd have to really work with the teachers ahead of time. And this is really something that happens over the summer and before school starts, and what accommodations need to be made. So one of the things I would certainly do is sit down with the shop teachers and the special educators and see what we can do to help these students meet their needs. And then you continually monitor that. You be supportive. You go into the classroom. You observe. You make recommendations. You make suggestions. You really do a lot of mentoring to those CTE teachers, because many of them were not born educators or not career educators. They came into this later in life after their years of being an expert in their field. So really a lot of what they have is knowledge based on their skill. So we need to really take the time to provide them the supports they need to mentor them in the right way to move forward. So I think that's something that has to happen, really, and don't be judgmental. They're there to help the students. We're there to help the students. And we need to make them understand that, everybody has the right to be part of the problem and the solution. So they also need to make suggestions and help out. So that's something that I've done. And in the past, I've worked with special educators in bringing them into the actual shop area and into the career technical education area. So they actually participated. I had a math teacher work in a carpentry shop to really help that teacher help those students do measuring and do types of other types of project with them. So, oftentimes you'd have to make it more inclusionary for some of the students as well. So really a lot of mentoring, professional development, a lot of feedback, really a lot of coaching. That's really important for the teachers. And as far as the students, you have to also work with the students, because by statute, we only have to provide 25% of accommodations in the shop, but I don't necessarily think that that is something that special educators do. I think if a student wants a specific career area or vocational shop, we make every effort to make sure those students go in there, and we try not to limit them. So that's something that has to happen. And you work with your special educators to help the CTE teachers as well.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm also trying to troubleshoot somebody who's having a little trouble getting in. So I'm trying to do, God knows me trying to do tech support is a terrifying thought. So Gracie, you had a question.
Hi. Hi there. Thank you. And I do. My question is, how do you plan to have the IEP students challenged and reach their utmost potential if it were hybrid or remote learning, or even regular full-time education, ensuring that they get challenged and reach their potential during the academic portion and also the workshop portion?
That is the million-dollar question, I think, with not only special ed students, I think it's with all students. It's going to take a lot of work, and it's going to take a lot of progress monitoring, to be honest with you. It's a lot easier to do the challenging when they are in-person learning, but the hybrid tends to be a little bit difficult because a lot of the onus, not necessarily for the high school students, but a lot of the onus does fall upon the parents. As a wife of a CTE teacher, it became a little challenging for him, I noticed this year, because, you know, a lot of the things that he took carpentry. So a lot of things that he had to do for the students, you know, he couldn't have them work with saws and work with drills and such. So it was very difficult for him to really try to make it, what's the word I'm looking for? Robust enough for them. So really he had to do a lot of thinking out of the box with the students. So I think that's something we have to try to do, is really how can we be creative and to make sure that the students feel engaged and are doing things that are more project-based. They can do these projects at home, even if they don't have the tools. There's certain things that they can do. They can, you know, for example, if somebody's a culinary student, maybe they can bake a cake at home. Not that that's higher level, but it's, you know, they can talk about, you know, how they did it and maybe really create a new flavor or whatever it may be based on what they have. So really trying to be creative, really thinking out of the box, letting them really use their imagination when it comes to these things. Because I think, to be honest with you, that's the best thing about education. Over the last 25 years, we've really spoon-fed a lot of the students, not only special ed students, but general ed students to, you know, here, stand and deliver, stand and deliver, stand and deliver. And the CTE model has always been incredible in the fact that we've always had project-based learning. And now you see more of that in the academic setting. So really, I think having the students do a lot of activities that allows them to look at, assimilate information that they've had and put it into some sort of a thesis and really make everything hypothetical and really try to test their hypothesis. And there's no reason special ed students can't do that as well. You know, so it's just going to be a lot of trial and error, you know, and rely on your experts to help you. I mean, I do not know how to teach web design. So I would never tell a web design teacher what to do, but I'd say, hey, what are some things that we can do to help all of your students, and specifically your special ed students, maybe level off some of their students' work for the ones that have a lower level, but some of the special ed students are extraordinarily bright in cognitive development and have many attributes that allow them to excel, and we have to really make sure that we continue to make them comfortable. A lot of students, you know, have anxiety, so we have to try to let them understand what they're doing is okay. We're here to support them. So I think it's important that even before all that, we need to make them feel safe and make them understand what they're doing is going to be okay, and we're all in this together. So really have to really make them feel comfortable to take the chances to do that, and that's really important.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mary Jane, along those same lines in terms of student accommodations, let's go. One of the questions is a little more specific. A student with sensory issues regarding the need to wear masks in school. What thoughts do you have around that? And alternatives, and how can we address that?
I would certainly, we'd have conversations with the parents and the students, and, you know, if face there are face shields out there as well. So that might be something we can do, but it's certainly something we have to look at. I have to look at the CDC guidelines, but the face shields are also something. But if they have sensory issues around the head is going to be an issue. So there might be other things we have to do, perhaps having plexiglass between the student and the teacher. Really, we have to make the student feel as comfortable as possible because we don't want anything to disrupt what they're doing. This is going to be a huge change for everybody. So I think having the plexiglass, social distancing, but again, if it's a student with sensory issues that needs somebody one-on-one, we're going to really have to try to put a lot of the onus maybe perhaps on the teacher in that respect. If the student can't accommodate it, and it's going to be very difficult for 4-year-olds to do the same thing, but especially for students with sensory issues. And not everybody's still even used to the mask. There are people today that don't, still want to wear masks, but I just read something today that school district is just going back to school business as usual, no masks, no social distancing, nothing. I think it was Orange County, so I just looked at that today. So really, I think making sure that we can find ways to make sure that we are meeting the needs of the students, whether it be a face shield, plexiglass, I don't know, whatever it takes to see what we have. It's new territory for everybody.
It is, and it certainly is creating lots of gray hairs. Let's talk about family engagement for a minute. How do you envision engaging families and students in the process and getting buy-in? I'm sorry. I lost my. Here it is. How do you envision engaging students and family in the process? I'm assuming that means the IEP process and getting buy-in from all parties. Talk about family engagement.
Well, first of all, things you have to have family meetings. You have to have a CPAC. So it's important to get your CPAC up and running and making sure that they're being part of the conversation. I love my CPAC where I am right now, in the fact that they're very active. They're very vocal. They like to support the students, and they let me know when there's something that they want to happen. So they've been very helpful, helping me bring in people from the outside to help the parents in the district. One of the things they brought in with me was a dyslexic expert last year with the people we have, really working together with the CPAC, having meetings for parents' rights. I think those are important meetings. Having meetings to talk about MCAS and what that looks like. These are just general all student meetings. And then, end of the year transition meetings, what summer's going to look like. So really make sure that you continue to have meetings. I think it's really important that you have parents be invited to the vocational advisory dinners, because those students, nice to have a representative for each of the CPACs on that as well. So that's important to make sure that you include them in the conversation. But overall, the parents should be part of the conversation. For the first, the 3-year evaluation, the 1-year evaluation, IEP meetings need to happen in a manner that everybody feels included. The students really we have to understand the background of the students, look at the data, talk about, what your student wants for the future. Once they turn 14, a lot of the IEP process, is about working with the student to get where the student wants to be, and have the parents involved is also helpful, because that way the parent knows what their students want as well. If they're interested in automotive, so we want to get them into that shop. What do they want to do after automotive? Do they want to work do they want to go to co-op? Do they want to go on to 4-year college? What does that look like? Do they want to go to a software company to work on, engines or whatever it may be? So we really have to be working with the parents, because, when kids move on to what they have to do, they're part of the processes too. Some of these students may have transportation issues, some may not. So really, these are things we have to discuss with the parents. Inviting parents is required in IEP meetings, but really making sure that their voice is being heard, because ultimately they're signing the IEPs. They want to make sure they're part of the process. We want to make sure that we are also monitoring the students' goals. So, how are we monitoring their goals? And we need to talk to the parents about that. How do you see this working? Is there something else you need to help you? What else can we do to support the students? But really having ongoing conversations with the parents. As an administrator in Athol and in Springfield, I was responsible for writing 504s and really the oversight of the IEPs. So I attended every IEP meeting in Athol, and I signed the IEPs as well before it went on to the special ed director. And the 504s, I actually wrote the 504s, and I took care of those as well. So really, the parents were always involved in the process. And we have to make sure that everybody's frank and understands that we are here to support the students. So, and ultimately that's it. Continue to have conversations, invite them to activities, involve them in your CPAC, involve them in your PTA. I really think it's important to get the parents involved.
Thank you. Mary Jane, have you ever been involved in a situation where you found that vocational education was not the right fit for a student? And if so, how did you handle that?
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's not only for special ed students, but students in general, to be honest with you. Yes, you have to be sure that you can have frank conversations with the parents. And that's something that you have, but hopefully you don't do it as a surprise. I've never had a student who's been involved in CT education that has not been through the process from the beginning to the end. I mean, we start, what can we do to make sure the students get where they need to do? And we try things over and over again. It may be, accommodations aren't right. It may be the shop, maybe they don't like that particular shop, so you make them move into a different shop. We've tried, looking, is it a safety issue? What can we do to help the students? But really just engage conversations. It's not something that you want to do, but unfortunately it does happen with all students. But having these conversations with the parents and going through the process and the steps and looking at data, I think data is important. You can't just randomly say this child's not a fit for where they are without showing the data that they're not, and really giving an opportunity to try something else, because just because they may not be appropriate for welding doesn't mean they're not going to be appropriate for nursing. I don't know. I'm just throwing that for example. So you just have to make sure that you've tried many, many different things, and because students have different aptitude for different things. And maybe they're more apt to take web design because they don't want to stand all day. So they realize that, auto collision repair wasn't for them. So maybe they'll do better at web design, or maybe they would like drafting. That might be something they'd like to do instead. So really trying to work with the students and saying, after you've been through exploratory, what do you think? There's something else we can try with you? But you have to be able to make sure that you have frank conversations and include the sending district as well, and let them know why they're not coming back. I think oftentimes when I was in my other districts, the sending districts were upset because, they weren't communicating and worked with us in the end, because you didn't send them back without having conversations. What are the needs this student needs as well? So it's important that you do that moving forward. I mean, we did that where we were, but I know of other districts who had some issues with just sending kids back without any prior knowledge. So really having conversations with both districts, your sending town and the district you're at, and the parents and the students. And really, it's not a short process. It should go through many, 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 many steps. Students' success teams, it should go through many, many things before the student comes back or goes back where they need to go. But it should be the last resort.
Thank you. Next question is going to come from Dennett Siddell. And I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
You are.
Thank you.
In one of your leadership roles, could you tell us about a significant need that you discovered in the district, and take us through the process that you took the district through to change that need to a strength?
Oh, absolutely. It's not going to be special ed, but I can certainly tell you what I did for instructional practices. One of the things that I focused on when I was a principal was really looking at, as I said before, a lot of the teachers in Athol were doing stand and deliver. A lot of times you'd see the students there and they'd be looking in space, and I would go into the classroom and say, what are you doing? And the kids would say, we're doing this. Well, can you talk about it? Can you explain about it? And what do we need to do? So as an administrative team, we sat down and said, what can we do to really make students be more engaged? So one of the very first things we had to do was sit and talk with well, of course we had to talk with our collective bargaining units to let them know that this is what we're trying to do. We want to make the students be more engaged, because one of the things we're also focused on was the dropout rate. And if students aren't engaged in their conversation, what can we do to make them be comfortable, engaged, and make them feel that they want to be part of school. Once students get to 7th and 8th grade, that's where you start to lose them. So you really, and what's important about CT education is they get that excitement, they have that spark, but that doesn't always happen in academics. So we have to really look forward to what we can do. So we spent a whole summer looking at curriculums and looking at processes to help students in classes. So our whole first year there was, observing, looking at the classes, and then sharing the data with the teachers. We saw you doing this, we saw you asking, 75% of what was happening in the classroom was all teacher driven, and we showed that. And then throughout the next, I think that was the first half of the year, and then starting in January, we started to go into the classrooms and do a little bit more modeling for the teachers and show them what it looked like. We brought coaches in, we had conversations as principals, what can we do different? And slowly we moved forward. And by the end of the year, you could see that the classroom were not flipped a lot, but they began to tilt a little bit in the fact that there was more group work, more students doing projects, more inquiry-based learning. And that's what we really tried to focus on. And when we got to the second year, I'm not gonna lie, the first year was a nightmare. The teachers were just not happy. They understood why they had to do it, but they were very, very, very uncomfortable. It just wasn't something that they had done before. But by the second year, I have to say, and I know they're in their third year right now, they have come a long way. They really embraced it by like June. And over the summer, we brought more people in to help them go through the second year. And the second year went so much more smoothly. And looking at the Learning Walk data, we actually saw more inquiry-based learning than we did in the past. And what was really helpful is we did a lot of assessments with the students. So they were able to see every 6 weeks what the benchmark of the student and the progress of the student made. And in the end, it did reflect better in the data that we supported through the district. And we also, brought our graduation rate up a little bit in 2 years, which is, not significant, but it did go up. And this really worked for grades pre-K through 12. I mean, really, it's important to get those seniors involved. So, and you don't want to let them feel that they're not important. So we really wanted to make sure that all students are getting it. It wasn't just the students in the elementary and in the middle school. It was a little bit more challenging at the high school because, as I said, high school tends to be more content-based, but the elementary and middle are not. But it really worked well, and I can honestly say that we've made tremendous progress in that area. You're welcome.
Thank you. Mary Jane, how often have you involved the BSEA mediation process when a parent or guardian rejects or partially rejects an IEP and asked to meet with the team to discuss why they are rejecting?
Can you restart? You froze a little bit. Can you start at the beginning?
Am I breaking up a little bit? I can tell my internet's getting a little flaky here. How often have you involved the BSEA mediation process when a parent or guardian rejects or partially rejects an IEP and asked to meet with the team to discuss why they are rejecting? What role do you play?
I've done that in just this last year. I've done it at least 3 times, and we talked to, we brought the team in and talked about it. And we actually brought in, we talked to the whole team as a group. We talked to the teachers and we met with the parent to find out, what specifically are they looking for? Why did they reject it? I can name one particular, the parent wanted a little more, I just lost my train of thought there. The parent wanted a little more time with academic support. It was 4 times a week, for an hour. The parent wanted it 5 days a week. It really didn't work well with the scheduling for us. So we had to, look at the data and see how can we accommodate that. So we managed to work that out, and that worked out well for us. But we do meet pretty frequently because, parents, oftentimes there are parts of the IEP they don't agree with. For example, like I said, one of them is student support. The other one is, math MCAS. Perhaps they would like a little more accommodations. And sometimes you have to tell the parents, no, based on the data, your child does not need a one-on-one reader for the MCAS because they're looking at their benchmark testing and their data that, they no longer need that support. I mean, I just use that as an example, but you have to really make sure that you run both sides of the coin. And I have to say, when IEPs are rejected by parents, it's a big meeting. We all get together and we have conversations before. with all the parties to say, before we make decisions, we need to make sure we have the data to back that up. And that's critical because if you don't have the data, then you have no leg to stand on if it goes further, if they continue to reject it and bring it to PQA. So that's important.
Thank you. Mary Jane, what do you see as the main differences in support for students heading to college versus trade or work after graduating from a VOTEC high school?
Can you repeat that question? What's the...
What do you see as the main differences in support for students heading to college versus trade or work after Shawsheen?
That's a really good question. Yeah, no, I heard that. That's a great question. I am trying to, really, your support should be the same for both. The difference is, how they get there. They might need more support, with perhaps writing their applications and making sure that they become a self-advocate. I think in the high school level, the vast majority of our job is to really make sure that our students are leaving as self-advocates. When you leave and go to college, you can't take your IEP with you. So it's important that we educate the students that, when you move on, it's important that you advocate for yourself. Take your information and know what your skills are, and then bring that, take it with you. Then they will make, it's not us to send it on. They have to bring it to them. And as far as, the work, we have to make sure that our transitions are where they want to be. Just because a student wants to go into the career, perhaps they want to go to community college. If they want to open their own business, they may want to take some business classes. If they want to be a culinary, want to open a restaurant or whatever it may be. So you may just want to tweak them a little bit, but the main difference is make sure that they're there to support, make sure that they have what they need moving forward. Really make sure that their goals are written to get them where they need to be. For example, in 9th grade, if a student says, I have absolutely no intention of going to college, when I leave here, I want to go work in the machine shop and I want to make $55,000 a year, and that's what I want to do. So you would take the next 4 years or 3.5 years or 3 years to work with that student to make sure that those goals are being met. And perhaps their senior, they can go out and co-op and find that opportunity. And then maybe, you can continue to work with them to make sure that they're getting that transition, help them transition into the labor force if they chose. But you also have to continue to reevaluate and visit that. You sure this is something you still want to do? If it's not, we can tweak what we need to do, adjust what we need to do. And the same goes through for somebody who wants to move on to college. And then by 11th grade, oh, geez, Louise, I don't want to go to college. I love this. I want to stay in this field and I want to be a web designer, but I just want to be an IT specialist at Shawsheen and I want to help here. So you have to really make sure that you're having the conversations and making sure that the students' needs are being met no matter what they do. And making sure that you have a transition plan that is robust and the students and the parents understand, what is the next step. And I'll let you know that when I was at Bay Path, we oftentimes, because I worked in the special ed office, and which was right next door to the co-op office, is we have people call us from other places and say, hey, do you have any students who are this? Right now, we would say, hey, I don't have any students who are old enough to participate in co-op, but I can reach out to another student in the past that we had that perhaps you'd like to do. So sometimes we would do that as well. So that for the shop. But as far as college, you would certainly sit with the program. College applications are hard, so they might need help with that, and they might need help, getting their license. Special ed students have special accommodations getting a license. IEP plans, how are they going to get to college? Okay, well, if you're going to commute, then you have to get your license. How can we help you get that? So certain things you have to be able to do across the board. And I think really just making sure that you have the conversations and making sure that their goals are help them set up for where they want to go, whether it be college or career or both. They can do both.
Thank you. So we have about 6 or 7 minutes left. So I'm going to, at this point in time, at least one more question to ask. And I do want to leave enough time for you to offer some final thoughts. So this actually circles back to one of the answers you gave earlier, and someone was seeking some clarification. You mentioned having special ed teachers working directly with shop teachers within their shops. What professional development would you offer, or have you previously offered, for special education teachers to allow them to be knowledgeable of the scope and sequence of each of the different shops? And how would you envision that to work in a school typically during a typical 10-day cycle? Boy, there's a weeds question for you, but, and we can tell that's from a staff member, but it's a good one. So I wanted to let it go through.
Let me tell you what we did, and I have to say, I absolutely love the idea. We took 2 of our professional development days. Because oftentimes in a CTE school, you know, I hate to do this, but you have your academic people and your vocational people. Sometimes they stay divided, and it's really hard to get them to work together in some cases. I don't necessarily know if that's true at Shawsheen, but some of my other districts it was. By the time I left there, that wasn't necessarily the case. What we did is we actually had our shop teachers doing little mini shops. And during 2 PD days, and the teachers transitioned through 4 shops in 2 days, and they gave mini lessons. And I'm going to tell you why we did that, because we did it for the academic side. And this is how it turned into the other way is if a math teacher was teaching something and in the Pythagorean theorem, and that student was a carpentry student, how can we, as an academic teacher, support the Pythagorean theorem that they use in carpentry, which is, you know, the ring, rise, rung, whatever they talk about. I'm not even an expert in that, but how can we transfer that into the academic area? So that really spurred a lot of conversation between the academics and the vocational people, because we brought the academics into the shop so that they could translate a lot of that information and have more conversation, which then led to us saying, okay, why can't we do with the other way? So we actually had the teachers then rotate through the shops and the special ed teachers specifically, not the academic teachers, but we took some special ed teachers who had some holes in their schedules in some certain areas that we thought they could be so one of the persons we have, and I'm going to use her, Mrs. Rugg, we brought her into carpentry. Now, Mrs. Rugg is a woman who's my age, who's never touched a hammer in her life. And let me tell you, she went in there, we provided her PD. She worked with a carpentry teacher. We sat down and worked with her over the summer because she had a student that she was really interested in working with. And she ended up really working with those students pretty well, one-on-one, 1 period a day, helping them with the measuring, helping them with, to be honest with you, she can sometimes help them, you know, with hand tools, no major saws, but she really enjoyed working on it. So really a lot of it was PD development, and special ed, the vocational instructors were a little leery at first, but I can honestly tell you that one of the teachers in auto collision repair, he said, you know what, I was your biggest skeptic when this happened, but I have to say it's really helped me out a lot, because it helps me as a instructor understand that every student thinks differently. We do a lot of things hands-on, but I don't think that, you know, they do different modalities. So having that extra support gives the person the extra time. And they really enjoyed it. And I know they continue to do that today. They did offer PD, and we did it both ways, academics and vocational. So it's a great, you know, it's something that even if I am not moving forward, I do think it's something you need to look at. And I think it's a great opportunity for everybody to really understand how they can help each other, because ultimately all of our students, and if we can help all of the students together, that's a great way to move forward.
Thank you. Mary Jane, as quickly as this started, we are coming very quickly to the end. So I'm going to give you the last 2 minutes an opportunity to wrap up. In your wrap up, I did want to add one question that's been asked, and perhaps you could address it through your wrap up, and that is some people. One of the questions is about your interest in a special ed position after being a superintendent, and as to why that is. So if you could incorporate that into your wrap-up remarks, I'd appreciate it, and I'll leave the floor for you.
That was my wrap-up, because I'm sure everybody's wondering. Honestly, I chose to move into an academic setting. And, you know, sometimes, as I said, things are not always what they seem. I really, really love CT education. I'm a proponent of it. I see the value of it. And I just feel like in the academic setting, we're setting students up to go to places and institutions that, you know, they're not able to obtain careers to help them be successful. So that's one of the reasons that I I really want to get back in CT education. And the other reason is I'm a firm, lately I've seen the students really become so much more, what's the word I'm looking for? Interested in being part of the process. And it's so interesting to see how students their social emotional needs are being met. And as a superintendent, I have not been able to be part of really working with the students and helping them be successful. Being a superintendent is very lonely, to be honest with you. And it was my choice to just let you know, to not move on as a superintendent. It wasn't something I was interested in doing. And Mr. Jackson can tell you, it is very lonely up there. I miss being with the students. I really want to be part of the conversation, and I don't want to be part of the peripheral conversation. I think that having the one-on-one and really understanding it, I really enjoyed being the curriculum / principal in Athol and working again with the students. I hadn't realized how much they actually missed it. And then when I got to be the interim superintendent, I was very far removed. And it's important that, you know, I create the equity and the access and the social emotional learning, but I can't see how it's working. I'm only getting data from other people, and I want to be part of the process. So really, unfortunately, as I said, the grass is not always greener where you want to be. And sometimes your life takes you in a different direction, and you have to reevaluate what you want to do. And to be honest with you, I want to be part of the solution, and I want to make sure that more students are having access to education, especially CT education. As you well know, a lot of the best students are being taken for CT education. I'd like to see more students get in who are middle of the road, and you don't see a lot of that. And that's something I'd like to focus on.
Thank you very much. Mary Jane, I really appreciate the time you spent with us here at Shawsheen virtually tonight. We do wish we could all meet you in person, although you and I did have the chance to meet in person this week. The process from here we have one other finalist that we're going to be meeting with next. And then Thursday night, I'll be bringing a recommendation to the school committee for election. So you and I will be chatting probably tomorrow as a follow-up. I want to thank you for joining us and invite you to please leave the meeting. Thank you so much, Mary Jane, and have a good night.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.
Take care. So if everyone will please stand by. I just texted the third candidate, and we will see how if my luck holds. I've been having some internet trouble here, so hopefully that will be short-lived. So if everybody can just stand by for just a minute, hopefully our third candidate will be joining us momentarily. So please stand by. And here he's joining us now. Tristan, welcome. If you could unmute yourself, or if you'd like, I would be happy to. Oh, there you go. I'd be happy to do it. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience as our third candidate joined us. This is Tristan Jovino. Tristan, we're going to spend the next 45 minutes together. We have a group of about 39. We've been holding steady between 38 and 40 participants, which is I'm very excited about about tonight in the middle of July. I think that's great. I wanted to, I'll be moderating this and asking most of the questions, although there are a few people who may pop in and ask a question or two as well, although most of the questions are coming from our participants through the group chat to me. So I wanted to welcome you and invite you to begin tonight with a brief summary of your work history that brings you here tonight.
Great. So first off, super happy to be here. And, you know, I've prepared a small opening statement for you guys. So I'm going to start out with that, then and give you a little rundown of my history. So first off, I'd like to take a moment to thank the Shawsheen Tech Interview Committee and Brad Jackson for the process they've set up. I'm very grateful to have been selected and feel that the objectivity of the committee and the transparency on all fronts has been a welcome change on my end as well. Like all of us here today, we all have our own stories and tales of trials and tribulations. As I've already explained more in depth to Brad Jackson, my educational background and personal experiences with special education have led me to this wonderful opportunity at Shawsheen. As a youngster, someone who grappled with my own special needs, and now a professional adult with 4 children, 2 of which have their own unique special needs, I find myself on the other side of the table frequently. I truly understand the personal side of what so many parents go through with their children with special needs. My experience, skills, and perseverance to navigate the special education world is my priority. I believe in strong parent engagement practices and bringing the same level of transparency about special education process, laws, timelines, etc., to all families and students of Shawsheen Tech. I believe in being a partner in the process and truly taking the time to build strong rapport and relationships with all of you. After all, we all want the same thing, and I believe in strong communication, collaboration, and building team opportunities. In saying that, I truly understand the importance of this role and intend to support the children as if they were my own. So my experience and background really is quite broad. I started out my career as a school counselor, wearing many hats. At that time, I worked as a school counselor, a team chair, and I also did some psychological assessment. Moving on, I've taken different opportunities to work at different levels at different points in my career, whether it was at the primary level, the middle school level. I've worked at the high school level. I've worked in charter schools. I've also worked in another vocational technical school in Boston. Opportunity to really see the spectrum of needs, see the spectrum of programs, service delivery, and really getting to know and understand how to navigate some challenging situations that unfortunately that we're faced with in the special ed world. So my pursuit of this position really comes at a time in my life where I'm looking for a leadership opportunity and a chance for me to grow into a greater position to support and manage a larger arena, which I feel like I'm out now at that point, and I really want to share my dedication, my passion, some of my skills, and some of my you know, my history, my background with everyone, and really develop those relationships to support your school. You know, I've told Brad in the past that my motto really is I go into situations being able to provide as much information as I know I'm going to take away. So I won't pretend to sit here and tell you that I know everything. I know a lot, and I know how to handle challenging situations. I know how to work with a diverse group of people. I know how to put systems in place to support the needs of children with special needs. But like all of us, you know, I go into situations with a humble stance, knowing that no matter where I go, there's always something that I can pick up along the way that could make my work a better and more pleasant experience, and knowing that there's more than one way to come out with a positive outcome. So that's why I'm here today. I'm super happy to be here. I've put a lot of time and energy into this process. Right now I'm away with family in Florida. I'm super happy to be able to be doing this with you guys tonight.
Thank you. So my first question to start things out, Tristan, is so why Shawsheen? What is it about Shawsheen that caused you to want to apply here, or are we just kind of the next position on the list?
No, so I can answer that question in a couple of ways. First, every position that I've taken, and I've said this to the committee when I initially interviewed, I think I mentioned it to you, Mr. Jackson. Every step I've taken has been methodical, well thought out, and I feel like it's a combination of factors. I feel like, when I found your position, I think it was in some point in May, I had made the decision this year that I was going to look into higher level leadership opportunities. And I wasn't going to spread myself thin. I was going to be very selective, take the time to put as much energy into the process as I would hope that the school puts into me. And so for that reason, I've only really put myself out there to a couple of schools. And when I noticed this position was posted, I had noticed that, I had done my research. I knew that, there was going to be a superintendent change. I knew that there was a lot of changes going on in the school. I've been reading up on the school itself and trying to stay abreast to, what's going on. And, the location I'm fairly familiar with. I'm coming from working in Lawrence. I have families and people that I work with that know the area well, and I've heard through people the reputation of the school, and through others. And when I saw this opportunity pop up, the name rang a bell, and I did my own research to try and find out more. And then when I found out that so many different things were going on, I felt like it was a good opportunity for me to put myself out there, as I'm a person of, I believe that change is a good thing. And I believe that when you're coming into a position such as this one, I knew that you need to have someone who's going to advocate. You need to have someone who's going to support and be a partner in the process. And when I saw all these things going on, I said, you know what? This sounds like an opportunity for me to really put myself out there, because I'm a person who really believes in a true, the process and building parent relationships and engagement and having parents and staff and administration work together as one, as opposed to having each entity kind of going their own way. So, and then the moment that I had or got the call to have my first interview, way back, I don't know, about a month now, I knew right off the bat at that moment in time that the experience was very different than anything that I have ever interviewed for in the past. And I've interviewed for a variety of different positions over the years, and I knew right away that something was different. You were taking the time to get to know me. A diverse group of individuals was put together for my first interview, and I really respected that. I didn't feel like it was a cookie cutter process. I felt like there was some meat to it, and I felt like you were doing your homework to really look into what you really wanted to make sure you're going to find the right candidate for this position. And at that point, whether I was the person or if I wasn't the person, I respected that process. And through the whole, up to this point, I've even said, what, this has been truly wonderful. And I really can't thank you enough for seeing something in me that perhaps so many others could have missed. without giving me the opportunity to really take the time to get to know me on a personal, professional level, and understand my experiences and why they've gotten to me to this point today.
Thank you. Ms. Gillis, I have the first question from the group.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Yes, nice to meet you.
What is your specific philosophy regarding the unique role of special education in vocational technical high schools?
So, what you're asking me is what's my vision as a special ed director? What would it be?
Sure.
So, like special education, I firmly believe that every student out there has unique abilities, different abilities, and the reason why one of the reasons why I'm looking into this school is I firmly believe that more than one opportunity needs to be afforded to some of these kids. Certain kids, certain children aren't cut out to stick with one type of programming. Being able to be in a school where you have the option with so many different shops, it opens up the doors, where if they didn't have those options, so many opportunities could have been lost. So just as so many kids have unique abilities, it would be my vision to be able to support the academic philosophy of the school in tandem with being able to make sure that services, supports, and the needs of our students are not only supported during the academic programming, but also during their shops. And also to make sure that the left hand is talking to the right at all times and that there's communication on all fronts. That's a really big thing I want to drive home is communication. I'm a huge advocate of making sure that we're listening to the parents, we're listening to the kids, and we're also making sure that teachers are communicating across disciplines, across special education to general education, to make sure that we're really looking for and providing the best supports that we can at all different levels within the least restrictive environment.
Thank you.
Thank you. So this next question really focuses in on your experience in vocational technical education. What's your experience with working with a technical school in terms of formulating an IEP to be incorporated into the vocational shops to support both the students and the shop teacher?
Right. And if I remember correctly, I did talk a little bit about this previously. So I did have experience when I was in Boston at Madison Tech Vocational School. I was the 9th and 10th grade coordinator of special education at that school. And at that time, the school was in turnaround. And one of the things that we were focusing on really was that communication piece, and being able to get kids to participate in meetings, I found was particularly challenging. But my thing is, the more engagement we have with the students in the meetings, I found that the more successful we were able to put together a program that was sustainable for the kids. And why? Because we got to really understand what their specific needs were. Whereas, when the kids were 17 and 18 years old, and at that time in that demographic, having that level of engagement sometimes was an issue. I like to focus on bringing the greatest amount of engagement with the peers and making sure that staff realize that when you're working with a kid or student with a particular disability, we're not only looking to support them in their academics, but also make sure that there's continuity and that we're involving all members of the team. That means shop teachers, if necessary, other related service providers that may need to go into the shop with the student, and making sure that we're putting together a multidisciplinary team at all times, and we're having the people that represent the various different challenges that the student's facing at the meeting. And that's really what it's about. It's a team meeting and it's a team process. Not one individual should be driving that process. Going back to my philosophy, I really firmly believe that when you have the right stakeholders at the table, and you're working together as a team, you're trying to come up with a program that's going to be best suited to support that student together.
Thank you. Let's see. Something a little more specific. What can we do to accommodate students who have sensory issues with regard to the need for them to wear masks in school when we return?
That's a very specific question, and one that I think we're all going to have to. So, my knowledge of students with sensory integration concerns is pretty strong. Is actually very strong. I've worked with students across all grades. I have 2 children that have significant sensory issues. And I really think that moving forward with the COVID situation, I think we need to get a sense of what the specific needs are across the board. I think hearing from families, hearing from students themselves, and hearing from teachers on perhaps, ways to accommodate these students and brainstorming together, it's clear as day that there's going to be new issues that come up and pre-existing issues. And I think, these are supports that should unequivocally be provided to students, whether you're on an IEP or not, just because of, the significance that so many kids, even on 504s, may have with sensory concerns. So, I think we need to come up with a plan together and really sit down and narrow down what those specific concerns are. I guess I'd like to ask a question, so when you're saying around COVID, are you saying, how are we going to accommodate students who have special needs? Or are you talking about students that may have sensory concerns that may not be on an IEP, because I'm sure that there's a lot of those? Or are we talking about kids with specific special needs that are already getting services? Because those are two very different ways that we would have to approach a situation. One of them we're required to do by law, and then the other one, I think we'd have to figure out how we can support the students that may have sensory issues that may not be on an IEP or maybe haven't been identified yet. Either way, I think we need to provide a level of support and a way of accommodating these students, because clearly it's going to be very uncomfortable and bring about, challenges and ways that they're going to need to learn.
Thank you. So I'm actually not going to engage in a back and forth with you, because this is really about an opportunity for you to speak to the group. So how you chose to answer it and break it down is helpful. Thank you. Gracie Dipolito had a question she was going to join us for. Gracie, go ahead.
Hi there.
Hi.
Thanks for your time.
No problem.
So I have a question. How do you plan to challenge the IEP students to reach their utmost potential if we were to go remote?
This is specifically around remote learning, or are you talking about?
If we go remote learning,
Mhm.
yes.
How do I plan to challenge them so that
Their utmost potential during a remote learning situation if we go remote learning
so
for workshop
um,
and academics?
yeah so fortunately for me, I've had a lot of experience over the last 4 or 5 months, working very closely with teachers, special ed, general ed, around the remote learning process. And although I was doing it at the primary level and the middle school level predominantly, one of the things that I found was across the board was that either kids were really engaged to the point where they were almost more engaged doing remote learning, um, full. And then there was the other end of the spectrum where you had kids who were dropping off and you never to be seen or heard from again. And I think we've all heard of those situations. It's across the country. I don't know what the exact statistic is. Something like 10 or 15% of kids kind of just dropped off. And I think what we need to do is try and understand what is it about online learning that motivates some, and for others is very aversive. I think when it comes to kids with special needs, I think my concern would be that we're not meeting the needs by proceeding as if we were at school. I think we need to have a variety of ways to reach kids, whether that means opportunities to work in groups online, use breakout sessions with different related service providers, have opportunities to do independent work, and then opportunities throughout the day where they can get that small group or one-on-one, even if they have specific needs that they need met, whether it's a specific learning disability, a communication disability, whatever it might be, or wherever the disability might be. So and then keeping them engaged. I think we need to focus on getting an understanding of what the shop, and this is going to be the difficult part. How can we get the shop, that specific shop, to engage in remote time online, and make it meaningful and productive, and what that might look like. I know it's going to be very different depending on the shop, but I think that, again, we need to have the ability to have an integration of service providers that are working with the special ed teachers that are working with those shop teachers, to ensure that whether it's a different approach, a different technique, a different way to get the students engaged online, I think we need to work on that. Clearly offering a class or a time online and then sending an email to a student is not by in of itself going to work. There needs to be other people involved to make sure that they have opportunities across the board to get the support that they need. And I think it becomes aversive, and I think it becomes kind of learned helplessness, if you will. Oh, I'm not going to go to this class because I'm not going to get the support, or I'm not going to be able to handle X, Y, and Z because it's through remote learning, and we have to break that barrier down.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Tristan, tell us about your experience you have with family engagement, and how do you envision engaging students and families in the special education process and getting buy-in from all parties?
Mm-hmm. So if that's not the question, I don't know what is. To me, engagement is really at the forefront and center of, I want to say, my success, really my success and how I've gotten to be where I am today. And I really feel like leadership role, such as this one, or even any role I've had as a coordinator, evaluation team facilitator, team chair, even as a school counselor, the number one thing that I strive to do was make sure that those guardians and parents had opportunities to engage with the professionals in the school. And what I mean by that is, I have an open door policy. You want to come by my office, please do so at any point in the day, as long as I'm not in a meeting. You want to pick up the phone to call me and ask me a question, you should be able to do that. I frown on situations where I have to jump through hoops, call 16 different people, by the time I get to the person I want to speak to, I'm so frustrated that, I'm probably not going to be able to relay my concern adequately or appropriately. So I think, I always put it back to the parents. I say, listen, you want information about your child, the person you should be speaking with is your teacher. They're the ones that are working with your student on a daily basis. However, if you have specific questions that you need guidance around, you have questions around the process, how to proceed with getting supports, or if you have a question around a service delivery, these are things that I feel like parents should not have to work for. These are the things I feel like I should have the opportunity to provide, which is another reason why I feel CPAC is so important. I put myself in situations routinely, and no matter what position I've ever worked in, to be actively involved in the CPAC committee at that district. And I would not pass the opportunity up at Shawsheen to take that same opportunity, because I feel like building that alliance with families and being able to provide opportunities for parents and guardians and related service professionals to provide insight into what it is that we do on a daily basis and how we can provide a level of support at the school. To me, that's invaluable. And I think that lowers anxiety, makes for a great relationship with the families. And, it's about transparency. You have just as many rights as I do in my role. I'm on the other side of the table. I get it. There's times we need to advocate for a kid. You got to do what you got to do. And there's times when, we need to work together. But when, the school and the parent disagrees, I think it's fair that the student and the parent have the ability to advocate for themselves in the most appropriate way. And I will support that. And I will work to help get you the communication and supports that your child needs, by maintaining a high level of engagement at every intersection.
Thank you. So let's talk about when we disagree. What experience do you have personally with with the use of the BSEA as a mediation arm, and what role do you think you should play in that, in trying to either facilitate a mediation, avoid a mediation? What do you think is the proper use of
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. So this ties into the last question. So, in my experience, over the last, 10 years or so, knock on wood, I've only had to go to mediation twice. Never had to go to a hearing. And the reason why isn't because I got lucky or isn't because it just never happened. There were plenty of opportunities for situations to boil over and go into a situation where, we needed to go to hearing or we needed to take it further or, but, tying this into my last question about engagement, I think when you have that level of trust with families and you build that from the bottom up and you're working with a family, a student, a guardian, whoever it is, a teacher at your school, and all sides are working towards a commonality of providing the least restrictive supports to help the student make the greatest level of progress while spending the greatest amount of time in the general ed setting. That's what we're trying to do. But sometimes a student may need a higher level of support and a school and a parent may disagree. And that's where I feel like having that transparency and having that, even though I might not see eye to eye with a particular parent or entity, I'm still going to provide those people, whoever it is, the same level trying to do before in the team meeting, but only, now it's at the level where, the parent has either, the right to go to meeting, the right to accept, what the new proposal would be or take it to a hearing. So, I understand the different levels. My whole motto, though, is following the letter of the law, whether it's state or federal, but being able to make sure that, we have the resources that we need and the programming that we need to ensure that students of all levels and types, or I should say um, most disability types and most levels of support are met at the school. There's always going to be a situation where data may back up, evaluation data or outside provided data may, support the need for a high level of support. And if that's the case, and that truly means that student needs to get a different level of support, then I'm not about to put a square peg in a round hole. I don't believe in that. I've worked in districts that try and do that. And I've worked in situations where somebody's told me that you got to make this work for this kid in this school, because that's all we can do. And you know what? I frown upon that because I've been through the system. My kids have been through the system. I understand what it's like when you have a struggling student that is legitimately putting forth 110% every single day, and they need a different type of programming to make them succeed. I get that. So there are times when we may need to go down that road together, and that's how I operate, working together.
Thank you. So do you think do you have any experience in the vocational world of a situation where a student just you didn't think was cut out for the vocational world? And if so, how did you handle that?
I'm thinking back, to situations where, a student may feel like they're being unsuccessful, in their academics, and because of that, they might be doing well in their shop, and, I think the problems that I faced before really came down to school issues, such as, there not being the right level of supports across different settings. And I think that's a big issue. And I think to minimize that, we really need to look at how those teachers and how paraprofessionals, other support professionals in the school are being utilized. So I think when I've sat down with kids that maybe felt like they weren't being successful, whether it was in a team meeting or a student didn't want to come to school, one of the things that I always sought out to do is to try and get a sense of, what might be going on, whether it's another related issue that may not have anything to do with their learning at school. It may have something to do with outside of school. So again, making sure that I have a guidance counselor, a school psychologist, someone on board with me, whether we're talking about truancy, whether we're talking about a student who's just giving up. It's very possible that a student might be faced with, challenges that may not yet have been identified. And whether that means special education or not, it's irrelevant. My job is to support, and help provide supports to all those struggling students. So I would want to make sure that we're utilizing tier 1 supports and the SST process to make sure that we're providing, and not all teachers are using a common language and providing a common level of tier 1 supports to make sure that all kids are getting the same message across the board and the same supports.
Thank you. So as quickly as it started, Tristan, our 45 minutes is just about over. We have 1.5 minutes left, and I'm going to leave that time to you to wrap up and provide any closing remarks for the next 90 seconds that you think you'd like to share with the group.
Sure, absolutely. So, first off, I'd like to again thank you. I'm very humbled to be here. I'm super excited in this opportunity. And the one thing I want to leave you with is that when and if you choose to bring me on board, my promise to you would be that I will be out there advocating for every student's needs, and a promise of working with each and every one of the family members, staff, and administrators to really focus on the vision and mission of the school. And most importantly, and I think this is, the perhaps the most important piece, is coming from a strength-based attitude and knowing that the glass is half full every single day when you wake up, and striving for success every single day. That's what I intend to do, and that's what I would like to do. With my experience, I know that this would be a wonderful position for me to grow into with all of you.
Thank you. So Tristan, that ends our time together. We appreciate you spending the time here quote unquote, at Shawsheen. And with that, you and I will be chatting in the next day or so. With that, I'm going to ask you to bid everyone a fond good night. And I'd like the other participants, if they'd just please remain for 1 minute so I can just wrap this whole thing up and talk about next steps with them and how I'm going to get feedback from the participants. So Tristan, with that, we thank you. We hope the weather is good in Florida, and please stay healthy, and we'll talk soon.
Yes, very healthy. Thank you. Same to everyone.
Thank you.
Stay healthy, and thank you again for this great opportunity.
Thank you, Tristan. Good night. Thank you, everyone, for staying and for persevering. This has been long and short, 2 hours and 15 minutes. I appreciate your perseverance and your great questions. I hope you found this process to be helpful. I just posted in the chat box my email address, which is bjackson@shawtech.org. I would welcome your feedback on these candidates through email. I'm asking for that feedback by 5 o'clock tomorrow, Wednesday. I'm scheduled to meet with the school committee remotely at 7:30 on Thursday night, and I'd like an opportunity to put all my thoughts together and come up with a good recommendation to make to them. So I would appreciate your input. I would also ask that I am going to, this meeting has been recorded. I am going to share it with all members of the school committee so they have the opportunity to, if they were unable to attend tonight, to see all three candidates in action should they choose. I would ask that folks offer our candidates, while they are public information, the professional, to treat them as professionals and to not discuss their candidacy and their pros and cons on public social media. I just don't think that puts Shawsheen in a very good light, and I don't think it's something that really reflects well on us as an institution. So, of course, I can't make that anything more than a friendly request. So, with that, unless anyone has any brief questions for the group, I'll pause there for a moment.
Thank you, Brad.
With that, everyone, I will bid you all a fond good night. Thank you so much for your time. I truly appreciate it, and I look forward to hearing your feedback. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you. Thanks.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.